Hello everyone, Mike Levin here. Friday morning, 10 a.m., September 25th, Friday. Driving in my Jeep, sitting at a red light, getting ready to get onto the Harlem River Drive and then onto the FDR to drive over to Staten Island to pick up my kid from the in-laws. I just made a pit stop to get my car inspected at the station at 204th Street. Highly recommended. They're really fast and efficient. And yeah, so let's see where I left off on that last video. I was getting ready to make a point, and then I lost it on other interesting points. The quote from SNL News guy, oh man, what's his name? The sarcastic one. Stop me before I sub-reference again. Dennis Miller comes to mind. So stop me before I sub-reference again. Oh, I'm sorry, you can't. This is YouTube. So anyway, I was talking about Jay Miner, the father of the Amiga and the father of a long lineage of awesome computers, and how he was sort of the father figure to a young, precocious team that was being put together. And a lot of this I'm just sort of repeating verbatim out of the book that I'm reading currently. The Future Was Here. That Amiga book on a platform studies series that goes into such great depth. I'm so impressed. It has recovered, say, the source code for things like the Amiga Boing ball, and it's going into the massive significance of the Boing ball to the Amiga's history and to the history of overall computing, how it broke expectations and caused many in the tech industry to just have disbelief that was a computer, not inexpensive, but a home desktop computer doing that, as opposed to some much higher end professional business workstation like a Sun system or whatever was those systems at the time. Apollo, I think there was one. But at any rate, he was putting together a scrappy, precocious team that wanted to change the world. He was actually looking for people who wanted to do something big. And from the start, he was helping these dentist investors led by this Kaplan, who got out soon afterwards as the video game industry was going belly up after its first coming, based on the ColecoVision and all those different fragmented game platforms. And it just was a fragmented, non-consolidated market with a lot of offerings, and after a while no money in it for anyone. So it went belly up. And the Amiga computer, which was under development at the time as a game machine, as the ultimate game machine, all the investors were like, whoa, this doesn't seem like such a good idea anymore. And Jay Miner was like, hey, no problem, this thing is a desktop computer too that can do some pretty nifty things for a desktop computer. And all this vision that was being put into the Amiga computer by Jay Miner, with such folks as R.J. Mical doing the operating system and Amiga DOS, were looking at the examples around them. And I forget what the workstation they were using was called. It was like Iris or something. It's it's not an Iris. It's not from that CGI small workstation generation, but it was before that, and it was used for chip design, and it was Motorola 68000 based. And I guess you'd call it along the lines of the Xerox Star computer, that legendary one that got, that inspired the Mac, but on the Motorola side and on, with chip design software. And that was based on a stripped down version of Unix. And so R.J. Mical, I believe, was inspired by that and took a lot of the principles of stripped down Unix and, command piping, data piping, and, how everything is a object in the file system, so you can read and write to it, no matter what it is. And he took these principles and he put them into the Amiga. And a lot of it was under the, the umbrella of Amiga DOS, and there were a few other things there. Kickstart to get the whole system booted, and then a Workbench that provided the graphical user interface on top that was a little bit Mac-like, a little bit Windows-like, but inspired by the same set of stuff that inspired all that, and certainly not unique. On the Commodore 64 at the time, they were working on something called GEOS, I think it was called, or the GEM operating system. And just this point-and-click stuff was all over. It was popular, so the Amiga had to have it too. So they had one called Intuition and Workbench. But that was never my real interest. My interest was all this Unixy-like stuff underneath. And I wrote Amiga-DOS scripts and AREX scripts and, you know, sent data from, you know, one program to another. 80 Pro, Art Department Professional. Straight from digitizers, did stuff on schedules and, you know, timing, kept things running forever, processing through stuff, and really, you know, understood the joys of automation, and, you know, the sort of bonsai trimming chores of a automator and someone administrating a system that's running a lot of scheduling. There's a lot of looking at things, making sure they ran correctly, adjusting to changes that happen out there, adjusting timing and scheduling techniques for maximum effectiveness, maybe putting in some randomness. And I really got to enjoy and love that. And then the Amiga went away. And it took me a long time to re-platform myself, or I shouldn't say that. I re-platformed onto Windows, and then I re-platformed onto Mac. And Mac, I have to admit, played a significant role as a bridge environment towards Unix and Linux-like operating systems, the NIX systems. And yes, I started installing Ubuntu on available PCs and on virtual machines. VMware Fusion on the Mac is awesome, the way it couples with virtual screens, so you can just triple finger swoosh left and right between full operating systems. I did a few of my Linux videos that way, and, you know, immediately questions came in, how are you doing that? Just switching between completely different systems that seem to work flawlessly. And I'm like, VMware Fusion, the oldest guys in the business, right? This is the ones who were acquired by EMC, creating those ESX, you know, complete virtual infrastructures, vCloud, and all that high-end enterprise stuff. But their Type 2 virtualizer software on the Mac platform is awesome. And I was on Parallels for a while, and Mac PC, there were a bunch of them. There were so many. I've been on so many emulators, going so far back to emulating the Macintosh on Amigas. And I believe his name was Simon Douglas. The company was ReadySoft. And as long as you could get your hands on some Macintosh ROMs, you could run yourself a nifty little Macintosh right on one of the multiple desktops of your Amiga. And one of the Amiga people's favorite sports, and I used to do this on the Amiga 1000, was to take the mouse, go up to the drag bar at the top of the Amiga, and drag down the Mac emulation, the black and white Mac emulation environment screen, to reveal the whole Amiga still running in the background. And in a day when Macs themselves still couldn't multitask and were mostly black and white except for the rich, this had a sort of knock your socks off impressiveness, a PFM, pure effing magic aspect to it, that it was very easy to let your identity get wrapped up and into. And I was one of those folks. I was one of the generation of Amiga raised computer geeks who got a very inflated self-image of themselves by being on essentially a supercomputer on the cheap. I remember explaining it to my dad, how special the Amiga platform was. And he was, I guess, impressed and like nodded. And I don't think he really understood it all, because he guided me towards the Coleco Atom back in the day, because it was such a great deal. You got a daisy wheel printer with it, and a tape drive, all for the same price as what you would just get the console for on another platform. So on the Commodore 64, which was the competitor of the day, you would just, for 500 bucks, I believe it was, get the console, and you had to maybe hook it to a television, but if you wanted a good picture, you had to buy a monitor, and you had to buy a dot matrix printer, and you had to buy a floppy disk drive that was itself almost as much money as the whole, computer. And there's a whole culture based around that. And what I failed to realize, and certainly my dad failed to realize, or else I want to believe he would have found the money to do the Commodore platform, was that the Commodore company was the creation of a Holocaust survivor, Jack Tramiel, who was making it in the United States, and whose high-tech computer company was right in our own backyard. Commodore Computers, headquartered in Westchester, Pennsylvania, of all places, and I guess presumably to be near MOS Technologies, which was an acquisition of Commodore and Jack Tramiel through extremely predatory business practices. Essentially, Commodore put in such large orders for MOS's chips, the 65, I believe they are up to the 6510, but of course it came from the 6502. That was the legacy, I guess, the VIC-20 that sort of catapulted the Commodore computers to the forefront of the home computer industry because of the wonderful little bread box design, the magically right price point, perfect timing with holiday seasons, perfect timing with the game industry going belly up with Atari 2600 VCS saturation. Everyone who was going to get one got one, and then along comes William Shatner advertising this VIC-20 beaming in and then beaming out, something like that. And it was just the hot product of that holiday season, and then it was quickly followed up by the little gray beige box, depending on what production batch you got, the Commodore 64. And I missed all that, and I was on the Coleco Atom during that period of time, and boy, talk about developing a underdog outsider mentality, and then switching from that to the clearly superior Amiga, which I scrapped together the money for a used one, a broken used one I found, and then got a disk drive repair, and then fell in love with the thing and failed to fully appreciate what was going on there, that I had happened into the continuation of the Atari 2600 tradition, designed by one of its principal chip designers and father figure of a inspired hardware and software development team working to change the world, building a dream machine, much like what was going on in sort of the Macintosh team. But whereas the Mac team cannibalized everything out of the Lisa and just repackaged it into a smaller box and made a different, operating system on top of it, and did it in black and white with square pixels, got a lot of clever stuff right, but created a very closed, proprietary, crippled box for rich people. Sorry about the use of the word crippled. I should probably say, use something more politically correct, but you get my meaning. It's a common term in hardware because certain features that could be there are arbitrarily not put in there. And the Amiga, meanwhile, could do all these wonderful things that the Mac couldn't, including entirely emulate it on one bit plane of the many available. That was multitasking in a greater framework that you could show off in this vertical screen grabbing or screen dragging that was extremely reminiscent of the mobile platforms today that have forsaken the Windows environment in favor of layered full screens that you can sort of cycle through. And on the Amiga, it was Amiga N, and I still have the muscle memory there of cycling through Amiga screens with Amiga N. But on mobile, it's always been this other crazy stuff, so either a long press or a double tap on the hardware home key, one of the worst things a mobile platform ever decided to do. And recently, Android, with a Lollipop version, just put they put screen switching, like the Amiga N screen switching, on the soft key. You're not wearing out a piece of hardware with a hard double click or a long press, and you're not doing the additional fatigue on your fingers with a higher pressure required for a mechanical switch. The soft switch button that used to be used for a menu but is no longer used for menus in Android is now used to rapidly switch between screens, and I couldn't be more pleased. And that, more than anything else, has got me going on these long, how long is that? 15-minute diatribes about how the mobile platform is finally now catching up with the Amiga. I don't so much feel it happening on the desktop platforms, and I'm now on Yosemite on multiple machines. I'm on Windows 10 on one machine, and I'm about to give in to the the prodding, the annoying Windows 10 upgrade message at work on my feeble little one processor Atom machine that I have, because I've been deferring all the hardware upgrades to the people I work with, because I consider it important for them to be on that new equipment. So it's easy for me to go without, because most of my work at this point is through terminals into Vim, and that doesn't take a lot of processing power. So yes, back to the original point, why I started this whole new second video today while I'm driving to Staten Island. I just went around the tip of Manhattan there. I'm coming up on the financial district, but I'll be turning off to take the Hugh L. Carey Tunnel, also known as the Battery Tunnel, to I guess the Gowanus they call it, and then to the Verrazano Bridge. So I couldn't possibly be talking to you that much longer. J Minor infused his love, his almost zealot-like commitment to his project, what I'm sure he saw as his legacy, and the culmination of brilliant work done prior that was building up to it. The VCS, which is the Atari 2600, the 400, the 800, and then ultimately the Amiga. And it's interesting, in the book I'm reading, one of the bits of reminiscing that J Minor did as he talked to people. Oh, yeah, J Minor, that's right. I get him and RJ Mical mixed up, but J Minor is the one I'm talking about. One of his regrets, no, I think it was RJ Mical. It's hard to keep them straight. Was using planar graphics for the Amiga's graphics instead of chunky mode. Chunky versus planar graphics was an issue back in the 80s when you had to decide how to animate the screen. And from a programming standpoint, for applications like Photoshop, you could do it much better in chunky graphics. It was easier from a software programming point of view, but you could do less nifty visual effects efficiently than planar graphics, where you could slice and dice the display in all different ways and just animate one of the planar bit fields and create these wonderful platform game-like layered effects. And so he expressed that as a regret, but it created one of the most crazy, awesome demo platforms. They called it different things, the demo, the mod scene, but it was crazy awesome, the graphics that people did with this machine, with color cycling and rainbows and circlings and 3D patterns and, you know, okay, I just got to pay attention to driving right now for a second. Yeah, the tunnel's open. There was a lot of traffic around lately with the Pope in town, and I'm just trying and hoping to avoid that traffic. And I'm about to go under the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel right now. So J Minor was the shepherding influence on the Amiga project, with people like RJ Mical and Dale Luck, who I had the privilege of meeting several times under his wings, and tried to create something that clearly was intended and in retrospect clearly did change the world. And of course that's fighting words to a lot of people who didn't even know the Amiga existed and were only raised on, you know, the NVIDIA and Radeon graphics boards of the PC gaming generation, the post-Doom era. Software company called id, I guess, shot the first shot off the port bow, or however that expression goes, with a program called Doom. And I made a vow on that day to never touch that kind of immersive 3D software, for fear that I would never come out again, especially considering what I had just gone through as being a fanboy on the Amiga platform. And I thought to myself, how would I be if the hardware were now suddenly unlimited and was actually keeping pace with my evolving expectations, and me not being the kind of C programmer that I knew I had to be to create optimized 3D virtual reality caliber graphics for these immersive environments. So I felt my heart pulling me in that direction, but my brain saying, no, put on the brakes. And my brain that said, no, put on the brakes, kept me in this very much more Amiga Graphics proprietary-like environment, working for none other than Scala Incorporated, a Commodore spin-off company. They were a Norwegian software company, founded by two partners, Daniel Block and Jan Bomer, who I still see in my mind clear as day, as if it were yesterday. And as the Amiga was dying, they decided they would not let their software company and dreams die with it, and PCs were recently becoming capable of Amiga caliber tricks, and they figured they'd be first on that bandwagon, and they did indeed pioneer the industry of digital signage on Windows 3.1 era PCs, believe it or not. I remember that like it was yesterday, and it was almost like the second major technology chapter in my life. The replatforming off of all that was wonderful and incredible about the Amiga onto everything that was mediocre, second best, and would take years to evolve, and would probably never be as good or inspired as the Amiga was, Windows PC platform. And then I start to learn stuff from all different Commodore guys. You know, I was tied in with so many branches of the Commodore people, not just the programming types, you know, who I put on a pedestal like heroes, but also by the more marketing types. And I still remember too, so clearly, Paul Calkin and his sidekick Jesse. I'm sorry, Jesse, if you ever watch this, but two bearded guys, Unix geeks, brought into Commodore because the Amiga was the first commercially available cheap platform to be able to run the grand unified, defractionalized Unix AT&T System 5 Release 4, SVR4 they called it. And I was like, well, what's the big deal? And Virginia Tech started requiring their incoming comp sci students to buy Amiga 3000s that were a little souped up to run this stuff. And I was like, I don't get it. Why is Unix on the Amiga so great? And Paul Calkin and Jesse, who always thought I was such a what do you call it, a rarity. I was so innocent. I was this suburban kid who wormed my way into Commodore as first a part-time job, a Commodore liaison at my university that required all incoming students to buy Macs, Drexel University, and then finally as a co-op student from Drexel, who got to go on trade shows and help with trade show booth builds and teardowns and man the booth during it. And it was an amazing whirlwind time that I spent my time doing as other people were spending getting drunk and laid at college. I was a commuter on top of all of this, commuting from the suburbs, one way to Drexel and then the other way to Commodore in Westchester, Pennsylvania. Drive in my Mustang convertible that I refurbished when I was 15 years old. 1970 351 Cleveland engine, Boss style, pre-oil embargo, muscle car Mustang, metallic blue convertible, white vinyl top, beautiful. But I digress. I loved building these stuff, and I fell in love with the Amiga as a visual media art form of expression platform. It was an intangible beyond description thing, but color cycling had something to do with it, vertical screen grabbing, perfectly smooth animation without tearing, even though it flickered and you were in low color depth, and the Amiga crashed a lot, and the mainstream software developers shunned the platform, and you got this wonderful dual superior underdog feeling that lasted for years and gave you an impossible but worthy thing to root for, as everything that was special about the platform languished and died. So you follow me. The Amiga platform was an awesome special thing, and by talking too much and not paying attention, I made a slightly wrong turn, getting off at an exit, and I'll just loop myself around and correct myself. But that will not sacrifice this video. Making a wrong turn on the highways of New York as you shoot a YouTube video, as you reminisce about the old computer days and tie it back to the Lollipop version of Android that just put soft window switching, soft app switching, soft button app switching in Android Lollipop. This is me. This is what I'm about. And I think I got my way off. I go off here, I loop around, I get on there the other way. But I may very well be wrapping the video up there because I kind of summed it up and I'm just rambling. And I gotta correct myself, and I may need my GPS to do it. So, thanks for joining me. Hope to talk to you again soon. And don't forget to subscribe and shape the world with your will using your vision.